Hi guys, it's Julia at the Mother Ranch. Before you get started, I want you to go and check out the description below. If you're on a phone, it looks a little bit like this. And if you look right next to the title, you'll see in the example here, there is a red star. It's not really there. I'm trying to highlight that little down arrow. Click on that down arrow and then you'll get to the description. And the description shows, as you can see on this image, where the free PDF is, where the supply video is, where the tracing video is. If you're on a computer, it looks like this. Also look for the red star. So first you're going to go, if you've not seen the supply video yet, go check that out and see what you need to get for this class. Then make sure you click on the free PDF link, which is your tracing image, and then check out the tracing video. And that's like 3 minutes long. It's super short. Again, this is if you've not done one of these classes before. Then come back here and we will start this class together. Your next step is to take your micron pen. I typically use the 01 size and trace your entire artwork, your pencil drawing, with this waterproof black pen. When you're done with that, either leave it for a little bit to dry or pop it in a low oven. Mine goes down to about 150, and make sure it's fully dry before you start the next step. And that next step would be to pre-mix your colors. So I've got yellow. You can see the little circles where each color is. Yellow, orange, in this case it's more of a peachy orange, brown for the eyes, purple, black for the pupil, and a blue, and then a white gouache or a white jelly roll pen. Either one is fine. So get those mixed up and then we'll get started. Okay, so let's get started. First, you're going to take your big brush and just give the entire sheet of paper a good wash of water, just plain clear water. I usually go back over it several times, vertically and horizontally, to make sure I get it completely covered. It's always a bummer if there's dry space on it. So take your smaller brush, like maybe a number 4 round, and some yellow, whichever kind of paint you're using. If it's watercolor, of course, it'll be very watery. If it's craft paint, it'll also be very watery. But you can definitely take your craft paint or your acrylic paint and thin it down to create a watercolor effect. And I'm just going around the edges of that circle, the outside edges of the circle. So the horse, the little foal, is in a circle, and then this is just the outside edges. And it will bleed into that circle, and that's fine. Just wanted a real pale yellow. It always dries a little bit later, so pay attention to that. Think about that as you're choosing your yellow. This is also a number 4 round. I'm picking up some of that purple. And if you remember, all this is wet. So as you put your color down, it's going to bleed. And that's a good thing. In my mind, that's a good thing. Maybe in your mind, it's not. Do the insides of the ears. And then this foal's little muzzle. And while I'm following the lines of the muzzle, I am aware it's going to bleed. A little bit more purple. Just dropping in some of that purple around the tops of the eyes. And a little bit around the mane. So on a foal, their manes are kind of curly, and manes and tails, and they're kind of frizzy curly, and they stick up. So a foal doesn't have the long flowing mane of a horse. This is the edge of that. This little triangle there is the edge of that horse's, inside edge of that horse's cheekbone. A little bit of purple into the tail. Just dropping it in. All this is going to be quite a bit covered up. Kind of giving a little bit of suggestion of the rear end there. Those little lines are from where the horse's head is turned, so its neck is a little bit wrinkled right there. And pick up some yellow, rinse out your paintbrush, pick up some yellow, and drop that into the forehead. And honestly, I'm saying this, but you can go where you want to go. If you want it to look somewhat like mine, then you can follow my directions. A little bit of yellow under the purple mane. Edges of the ears, tips of the ears, then the outside of the rump. Now I'm just kind of putting color here and there. Again, wherever you want to put it is just fine. Mixing up some orange and dropping that into little places. Of course, the orange and the yellow work really nice together. Grab a little bit of blue, add that to the tail. And the rump. So when the yellow and the blue mix together, you'll get a little suggestion of green when those two meet. So the water in the paper is starting to evaporate, and it's not mixing quite as much as it was. It's still working. It's good enough. A little bit more blue around the ears. And around the edges of the eyes. Not really leaving white space in the foal itself. Again, you can if you want. So that little section there was really, really blue. So I just took a little bit of water, cleaned off my brush, took a little bit of water, and dabbed it onto that really, really bright blue area. This whole thing will get darker as we go, but it was a little extreme for me right there. So I'm mixing a little bit of the purple and the blue together to get a little bit darker color, and I'm adding in some shadows into the little foal's nostrils and a little bit on that lower part of the muzzle. All right, so at this point, the painting is dry. I'm darkening up the inside of the ears. This is now painting wet on dry. So the painting is dry, your paint is wet, of course, and that means it's not going to bleed anymore. Giving an edge to this left-hand ear. You could use purple or blue, well, really any color, but I'm using purple. I think it's purple. I should have looked as I was. I'm doing a voiceover, so now I can't tell. It's either purple or blue, and either one is fine. Yeah, that looks purple. Okay, darkening up the cheek on the left-hand side, because that little section there is in shadow. If you think about where I am right now, that is the edge of this horse's butt, that little rear end there. So being careful around that lower part of the triangle, because that's a sharp line. Just picking up tiny bits of paint at a time. So if you remember me talking earlier, I was talking about that little section being little wrinkles where its little head is twisted around, looking backwards. So I'm going back and going around the eyes, there's a section around the top of a horse's eye. I suppose it's not really the eyelid, but it's kind of like an eyebrow. And they have a lot of expression there. And you can see that I've kind of ringed the eye, but then there's a little piece at the top, like a little pointy piece, kind of a little triangular piece at the top. That's just kind of its, I wonder if they're considered eyebrows. I don't really know. But when horses, I have one in particular who, when I'm coming out, he's asking me questions, and he often has that part of his eye, that little eyebrow there, peeked up as a, hey, did you bring me a treat? Are we going to go out and do something else? Are you bringing me a client? What is it? And his little questioning eyes are very sweet. I shouldn't say little. He's our biggest horse. That's Winter. If you guys have seen pictures of him or know anything about him, if you've been out here, he's almost 18 hands. He's a big boy, half draft, half Percheron, which is a draft, and half thoroughbred. I had someone ask me recently, what is a thoroughbred? And I explained that it was a certain breed. It's the breed that you see if you happen to watch the Kentucky Derby or the Preakness or the Belmont, any of those types of racehorses. That is the breed that races in those races. So little tiny dots. Lots of little dots and squiggles because that area between the ears is where its little fuzzy mane and forelock is sticking out. So ringing this eye again. Little suggestion of an eyebrow. Getting most of the paint out, so it's not a real wet brush. This is a little shadow that I just did in the horse's rear end. More squiggles in the mane. It's sometimes easier to turn your painting. That's why I never tape it down to my work surface, is because sometimes I like to turn it. It's easier for me to make squiggles and drag them toward me. And as you're doing these, you push down a little bit at the beginning, and then as you're squiggling, just back and forth, kind of like little ziggy zags, then lift up on the brush. And when you do that, it creates a thinner line at the tip. Back in and darkening the nostrils again. I like to work in layers. I could have gone in and just made this dark, dark, dark in the beginning. But I'm never fully certain what direction I'm going with the painting in the beginning stages. Usually it kind of develops. I almost never know exactly what it's going to look like. I have some ideas. I have a general idea in my mind, but things change. Things change and morph, and maybe it's like, oh, I think I'm going to go do something completely else. So if I work in layers, then I'm never too dark in the beginning. You can always darken up. Actually, there's some tricks to lightening too, but anyway. So stirring that paint around a little bit, because sometimes certain colors will settle. Giving a little bit of a shadow to where the tail is. So again, those little zigzags, because the tail is very fuzzy and curly too. Picking up a little bit more purple. And I changed my mind. So rinse that out, and because I want this area to bleed a little bit, I'm just going in with clear water and getting this area wet. Because this is all a little bit shadowed here too. So making sure it's got a nice sharp line up against the horse's little rear end there, because that's the part that's in the foreground, so you really want that to be clear. And then just darkening up the edge of the face. You can see I'm making that line very sharp. So a little bit of blue now. Just on the inside edge of that, the way the muzzle comes down, or the plane of the face comes down to the muzzle. Darkening up the insides of the ears just a little bit. And a little bit more, sharpening up those edges just a little bit. A little bit more in those nostrils, giving them some more definition. Some little swirls and squiggles in the blue in the horse's forelock and the mane. So the forelock is in between the ears, in the front of the face, and then of course the mane too. So some blue squiggles. Remember to lift up on your brush just a little bit at the end of the stroke, and that will give you that thinner end of the little piece of hair you've just drawn. Same thing, swirls and squiggles in the, I said squirrels, swirls and squiggles in the tails, tail feathers, tail, oh my lord, not tail feathers, tail hairs. Darkening up this area just a tiny bit, just to give it a little bit more definition and depth. It's still in the kind of funny phase right now, but it will come together, I promise. So with the purple outlining the edge of the muzzle a little bit, the bottom edge, to give him a little, or her, a little bit of a suggestion of a little lip there. And then go ahead and darken up this left-hand side of its rear end. And getting this area wet just with water at the top of its rear end. I want this to bleed just a little bit, darkening up this area. Keeping that sharp line against the face. So I'm just blending a little bit of water with the blue on the edges of the blue to help it blend out into the yellow a little bit. So taking some dark brown and outlining the bottom part of the actual eyeball and filling that in. Just need a little bit of paint. It's a very tiny area. It will look more normal eventually, I promise. And then doing the right side as well. So you can see with this horse's right hand eye, because of the way it's turned, the eyeball is actually out into the right hand side of it is actually out into space a little bit. There's no body or skin around that side. There is, of course, but the way the horse is angled. And so it's important to keep that looking like that for extra realism. So a little bit of purple, darkening the nostrils again. It's tempting to go back and try to add a pupil or highlights into the eyes, but you need to wait until it's fully dry before you do any of that. Otherwise it just bleeds and makes the eye muddy looking. Some more purple, some more darkening of the insides of the ears. Little short strokes to give some suggestions of hair. And little tiny short strokes off the tips of the ears. Not so much because horses have that, but because I like the way it looks. Little bit. So remember how I talked about they have these little eyebrows, right? That's the little section I'm working on now. Just a little line above the actual eye. Giving a little bit of detail around the eyeball itself. When you do it like this, the way I'm doing it, make sure that your hand is not resting on that right-hand side eye so you don't smear it. You can always turn it upside down if you need to. Lightening up this tail just a little bit with some yellow. Bringing in just a few suggestions of highlights. It seemed very blue, so I wanted to make it a little bit, add some of the other colors, a little bit of yellow, a little bit of orange. Here I'm taking some more of the dark purple and adding a little bit more definition to the wrinkles in the side of the neck. As the neck is turned, as the head is turned, the neck is turned, so it makes little wrinkles in the skin. So the next part is taking a little bit of orange and just creating little dotted lines. Do you remember how there was a circle around this horse? So just tiny little dashes with a little bit of orange. It is going to go out of the picture. That's okay. It was intended to. So next up is some yellow. So the first line was dashes, little tiny dashes. This line is little tiny dots. The yellow has actually dehydrated a little bit, so the consistency is maybe between milk and cream. And I'm just putting little tiny dots, that's it. So I'm taking just a little tiny bit of red, adding like a drop of water, a little tiny bit more red. And in watercolor, when you add more water, it's going to get lighter. So it's kind of, when it goes down, and it's hard to see because I'm not really zoomed in on this piece, but it's kind of a rosy pink. Back to the yellow again, and I'm doing dots again. You can do whatever you want. It can be dots, it can be dashes, it can be stars, it can be circles. This just happens to be what I'm doing. So it's alternating dashes and dots. This is the yellow dot piece again. And then the final set of dashes on the outside is orange. And that little halo is complete for that part. So the next part, I'm taking some orange. It's milk consistency. And with a short liner brush, I think this might be a 01. And just making a little spiral. See that little spiral there? Defining that hip more. That last little line was just defining the hip more. And same with this. Making it more of a clear line. I haven't painted in a while, and this is making me want to paint again. I've been busy doing a ton, and if you're following along, you probably know this, a ton of marketing, which has been great. My business has grown, and that's great. But I am missing out on painting. I've got to get back to it. So here I'm using some orange paint, and on the right hand side of the foal's hip is a little orange heart. Again with the orange paint, kind of defining the edges of the foal's face. If you remember, we let the paint kind of bleed out of the spaces, so we have to go back and actually give definition to where the foal's face actually is. So grab some more brown paint and put another coat on the eye. This is just a little bit lighter than the last coat as I look at it. A little bit more yellow added to your brown if you need to. So with some blue paint, I'm going in and adding just some real simple flowers. Little 5-petaled flowers. These are going to be imperfect, and that's the joy of them. So I've got one in the mane, one in the bottom of the tail, and wherever else you want them. Maybe you want one right in the center of its forehead. One of them coming off of its ear. Who knows? It doesn't really matter. I'm putting another one on its ear. So just 5 little petals off a center point. Here's another one over just underneath its eye. You don't have to add these at all if you don't want to. Okay. So the next step is to take a little bit of orange, stir that up a little bit, make sure it's well mixed, and then another little spiral closer to the right eye, or wherever you want to put it. And here is another one down further on the muzzle. So with a little bit of darker purple, go in and give the muzzle a little bit more definition. The underside of it, of course, will be dark. A little bit in some shadow. Just darken that up just a little tiny bit. Excuse the dogs barking in the background. It is feeding time on the ranch. So just above this darker area in between the nostrils, I'm putting little tiny purple dots. Just for fun. With a little bit of orange, I'm going in just under the mane, just under that little purple frizzy mane. I'm adding a little orange heart. And then grabbing a little bit of blue, and on this top part of the horse's rear, I'm going to add another little 5-petaled little blue flower. So it's going to be blue on blue. Don't worry if it doesn't show up a lot right now. We'll go back and outline it with a pen and probably a little bit of white too. Little dots around that flower too. And then a few little dots in blue above his right eye. Using just a little bit of black, go in and give him a little pupil. So horses' pupils are long like a goat's, but a little more rounded on the ends. So a kind of at an angle, if you draw a line between his eye and his nose, so that's kind of the angle I'm putting him at, like a little narrow rectangle. So here I've decided that I didn't really like his eye hanging out into space. So I'm just adding a tiny bit of very watered down blue and spreading it out so it doesn't have a sharp edge. Just a little tiny bit of blue behind that right eye seemed to suit me. Just fan it out a little bit so it doesn't leave a really sharp line. So now I'm taking my Micron black pen. The size is 005. It's the tiny one. You could use a 01 as well. And I'm going to start giving definition to, well, the whole little horse. So right now I'm just kind of working along this right-hand side edge of its rear end. Remember, you can always turn it around to, it's easier for me to pull toward me, especially with a little pen like this. This is a waterproof pen and archival quality. So I'm just following the lines. I'm going around my little flowers, the hearts, the spirals, all of those things, and just giving everything a little edge. It's nice when they have pins that are so tiny like this, so it's noticeable, but it's not so noticeable that it looks like, you know, a heavy-handed marker. This style of watercolor, when you use watercolor like this with a pin edging, is called line and wash. And it is my favorite. It's my favorite currently. It's been my favorite for a long time, actually. But who knows? Maybe it'll change in the future. continuing to go around and give definition. So right now I'm working on the eye on the right, starting really, really fine and faint eyelashes. Following the line of the face all the way down. Adding some more darkness to the nostrils. So going up into that right ear, and this is a 01 pen, so it's a little bit thicker, and give some definition to that right ear. Remember, if you're looking for hair-like or eyelash-like look, then it's flat on the paper and then lift up and away from the paper as you're drawing the line. So you get a thinner tip of the line. So I want you to pay attention to the final product here and look at those eyelashes and see how they are shaped. Right now you're going to see a lot of the white as well. That comes later. So right now we're just working on the black. So on to these eyelashes. I am lifting up. I keep talking about this. Lifting up as I draw those eyelashes. So I have the pen on the paper, and as I'm drawing down the eyelash to the tip, I lift up so the tip is thinner. And if you've seen any of my artwork, you know I like really long eyelashes. You're allowed to choose. This pen is a 01. You could use the 005 as well. So just continue following your lines and outlining the little foal. Darkening up those little nostrils. And then in the mane and the forelock, lots of squiggly lines, squiggly and curly. So yeah, just little curlicues and squiggles. And mine there are in the mane and the forelock, but they also go up and beyond as well. use little lines and hash marks to darken up the insides of the ears. And if you need to, you can rotate it around so you can get to the mane and more curls, more zigzags to create that fuzzy, frizzy little mane. Darkening up the black pupil of the right eye. Then starting to give some definition to this left eye. And then this pupil as well. And if you remember, I was saying that it's easiest to pull the pen toward me. It may be different for you, but for me it seems easiest when I'm making those eyelashes to pull the pen toward me. And this is where I started to realize I wasn't going to be able to see the eyelashes quite the way I wanted to because of the shadow, that purple shadow just to the left of that left eye. And that's when I decided I would go in with some white later on and also create some little lighter eyelashes to be seen against that shadow. All right, so the little tiny hairs around the muzzle. Remember to lift up at the end of your stroke. And horses in general, but foals in particular, have quite a bit of hair, little like, I guess kind of like whiskers around their mouths. There are actually some places. So show horses, people with show horses will shave those all off so their horses' faces are very clean. And there are some places now who don't allow that, which personally I think is great. The horses use all of those little whiskers kind of like a cat does, and it gives them a lot of information. And so to take those off is taking away a part of their body, really. It's an important part. So into the tail, which is also kind of curly and frizzy. Giving it some little squiggly lines in here too to suggest the texture of the hair. Now into this purple shadow area to the left of that left eye, I'm going to just add some short little lines. Just another way to darken it up. And maybe yours is already dark enough. Maybe you feel like, no, that's good, and that's okay too. Knowing I'm going to add the white eyelashes to that left eye is enabling me to go ahead and think, okay, I can make this darker over here. Darkening all that whole area down into the V between the face and the foal's rear end there. Again, little short lines just to give some texture and darkening up this side of the face. Then with some more curlicues and squiggly lines around kind of the outside of the tail, suggest some more frizziness of this little tail. And I've decided it's not quite dark enough over here yet. It's still not receding the way I would like it to. So darkening, darkening, darkening. I'm finding those last little details. I forgot to outline this little spiral over on this side. And then this little dots around this spot on the top of the butt here. We're getting there now. All right, so I have a little gouache over here, which is a opaque watercolor. So this one's just white. I'm going to go in and give just the tiniest edge of white around the far right side of this right eye. And then the inside corner of this eye on the left-hand side, and a little tiny highlight. And this one gets a little right-hand side gets a little highlight. Doesn't that change everything? I love the way when that happens. Suddenly, a little foal looks alive. Little tiny bit in the nose. And then with this gouache, thinned out enough with a tiny brush. I think it's a 0.1. Give it some eyelashes. Particularly on this side where the shadow is so dark, I want those eyelashes to be seen. I add a little bit to the right just for symmetry, and because there's a little bit of blue back behind the eyelash area of the right-hand eye. So if you water down gouache too much, you end up losing some of that opacity. So it still covers better than a regular watercolor would, but it just has to be this perfect consistency. So if it's not, you just go back over it. It's no big deal. Wait for it to dry just a little bit, and which usually takes just a couple minutes, and then go back over top of those marks. A little tiny bits of white hairs along his little muzzle. And then a few little squiggly highlights in the tail, which got a little dark for me. So still using the white gouache, putting a few little tiny white dots up here on this blue section. And then adding some more white squiggles to the forelock, around the ears. And then a little bit into the mane, just little tiny bits of squiggly white. Some little highlights in that mane. So I'm going back and lightening up just a little bit more of the highlights in the eye to make it more noticeable. Like I said, I probably had too much water in my gouache, and so it wasn't thick enough to cover the way I wanted it to. So I'm just highlighting that, or adding to those little highlights. And a little bit of white just around the edge. Since I've already put the black line on here, I'm just to the left-hand side of that black line, lightening up this side of the horse's rear. So this last little chunk right here where I'm still adding all the white, I've just fast forwarded it just a little bit, because as you look at your own painting, you'll realize all the different areas of the white that you would like to have just a little bit lighter. So go ahead and do exactly that. So take one of your bigger round brushes, a 4 or 6 or even an 8. Get your paint, add a little bit more water to your paint, and load your brush up pretty well. And for me, I didn't want the little horse to have splatter all over him. So I'm just taking and kind of banging my paintbrush against my hand, protecting the actual painting with my hand. You could also put a piece of scrap paper on top of it, whatever, something like that. Something thick enough though that the paint won't go through. So I just used purple, and I'm going ahead and pre-mixing my orange and my yellow. And you can use all the colors that we used in this painting, or just a couple, just one, however you want to do it. Maybe one color is, you just love it more, so use more of that. So once you get this part done, you're going to take the tape off of your painting, and when you do, go very, very slowly so it doesn't pull the top of the paper, the first layer of paper off. So be very, very careful and make sure as you're pulling it away from the painting. And once you're done with that, you're done. Woohoo! You did it! I hope you enjoyed painting this little fuzzy foal with me. Please like, subscribe, and share with your friends, your mom's groups, and homeschool co-ops. Then head on over to themotherranch.com and sign up for my weekly newsletters. There you will receive special deals and freebies. Next month, on Friday, November 20th, we will be painting the Windy Piglet.